A Missouri farm boy named Emmett Vance watched his grandfather peg a living pear branch down into a mounded trench, and by the next spring they pulled 4 rooted daughter trees off one mother pear. No hormone powder, no plastic pot, no jar with a label, just a living branch folded into the dirt and left alone. You have a pear tree in your yard, or a neighbor does, or there's one gone half wild along a fence line you drive past every day. You already have every tool the old man used: a shovel, a pocket knife, a handful of dirt. Today, most folks will tell you a tree cutting will not root, that you need a bag of chemical rooting hormone from the garden center, that a pear tree comes from a plastic pot with a price tag on it, and there is no other way. But here is the twist. The record says the old orchards this country was built on came off the ground, not off a shelf. Some of what is coming, the rooting hormone companies would rather you never mix in a jar. Number 6 cost you a walk to the nearest ditch, and it is the reason those little jars stay on the shelf, mostly untouched by anybody who knows. Number 3, a land-grant nursery still uses it to this day to turn one plant into 10. And there is not one homeowner in 1,000 who has ever heard of it. And number 9, there is almost nobody left doing it in a backyard, because the equipment aisle sells you the plug-in version for $60 and hopes you never learn the free one. None of this faded because it quit working. It faded because somebody sells you what the ground used to give you for free. That is not on you, friend. They are good at making you need them. Before we go on, there's something coming for this country, and the news won't say a word about it till it's already on your doorstep. It comes down to one number: 3 days. That's what the stores hold for you. My grandfather Eli's pantry held a winter, and the difference was never money, it was knowing. I'm Silas Mercer, 7th generation on this ridge, and before Eli died, he made me swear that knowing wouldn't die with me. So I set it down, 904 pages of it in one book, silasmercer.shop, links below. All right, back to it. Number 20, a mother hedge you plant on purpose to cut from. Your great-grandmother kept a row of currants and gooseberries along the fence line, and every year she took a knife to it and made 10 more plants for a daughter, a neighbor, or the corner of the yard nothing else would grow. A hedge of 8 established currant bushes gives you 30 to 50 rooted starts a year. A single potted berry bush at the garden center runs you $15 now. That is a couple $100 of plants a year off a row of shrubs you already had for the fruit. The container nursery boom that took off after the war just started selling you the shrub, one at a time, in a plastic pot. Nobody outlawed a mother hedge. Folks just quit thinking of a bush as a mother that made more. Modern land-grant extension guides still teach hardwood cuttings off currants and gooseberries. You take a pencil-thick dormant stem in late fall, cut it a foot long, and shove the bottom half into a sand-filled trench along the north side of a building. Come spring, it is yours. One row, free plants, every year, forever. That one is just a hedge. The next one is about a book. Number 19, a written record of what took and what did not. Your grandfather kept a page for every tree he ever grafted or rooted, in pencil, in a book that lived on a shelf by the door. Variety, date, science source, weather, and whether it took. It kills no dollar bill you can measure, but it kills the one that hurts most. That is the same mistake made 3 springs running because you never wrote down what happened last time. The Buy a Finished Tree magazine register replaced that book with a picture of somebody else's orchard. Nobody profited off you not writing, exactly. It just quit being a habit anybody taught. The seed and nursery catalogs love a customer who cannot remember what he tried last year. Eli wrote the date, the variety, and one word: took or did not. That is the whole science of it. A land-grant orchardist keeps the same notebook, just fancier. A 90-cent notebook. 1 line per graft. That is the difference between guessing and knowing. That one is about paper. The next one is about dirt. Number 18. Leaf mold and sifted compost in place of bagged potting mix. Your great-grandmother's propagation medium came out from under the oak tree. 2 years of fallen leaves, rotted down black and crumbly, sifted through a piece of hardware cloth. A bag of seed-starting mix at the garden center is $12 to $18 now. You will go through 3 or 4 in a serious propagation year. That is $50 or $60 a year of dirt when the yard is making dirt for you every October for free. The peat-based propagation industry took off with the container nursery boom. Once folks were buying dirt in a plastic bag, buying dirt in a plastic bag became normal. It is not banned. It is just marketed harder than a leaf pile. Modern horticulture texts confirm well-rotted leaf mold is a fine propagation medium. It is light, it holds water, and it carries low disease pressure. Rake leaves into a wire ring in October, wet it down, wait 2 years, and sift it. 2 winters of patience, a lifetime of free dirt. That one is dirt. The next one is a knife. Number 17. The bark graft on a wild pear tree that already grows in your county. Every county in the eastern half of this country has ornamental pears gone half wild along fence rows and old lots. Calorie pear, Bradford pear, the ones nobody eats. Your grandfather looked at that same trunk and saw rootstock somebody else planted for him for free. A grafted name variety pear tree at the nursery runs $30 to $50. Turning a wild pear into a Bartlett or a Kiefer with a bark graft cost you a scion stick from a friend's tree and a roll of grafting tape. The container nursery model wants you buying the finished tree delivered to the store on a truck. There was never a law against grafting a wild pear. The knowledge just quietly stopped being taught at the same time the truck started rolling. Stark Brothers Nursery in Louisiana, Missouri has been selling grafted fruit trees since 1816, and their own bulletins teach the bark graft. Saw the wild trunk back, slit the bark, slide a match scion under it, seal it, and wrap it. Extension bulletins still teach it. Wild trunk, free rootstock, 1 scion. A pear tree that is actually a pear tree. That one is a wild tree. The next one is a bought one. Number 16. Volunteer seedlings pulled from under an existing tree. Under every fruit tree in the country, seedlings come up every spring from dropped fruit. Your grandmother pulled them, potted them, and grew her own rootstock nursery on a bench behind the house. A certified pear rootstock from a specialty nursery is $5 to $10 with shipping. A volunteer under the tree is nothing. 10 seedlings in cans, grown a season, get you 10 free rootstocks ready to graft. The certified rootstock industry sells consistency, a known dwarfing height, a known disease resistance. That is a real product for a real orchard. It is not required to feed a family off a backyard. The chain garden center just made the words free tree sound unserious. Modern land-grant extension guides note seedling rootstocks are more variable, but they root deep, live long, and cost nothing. Wait for a wet April, pull the seedlings, pot them up, and graft them next spring. Free rootstock. Under the tree you already have. First pattern break. Here's where it stops being quaint gardening and starts being the reason the propagation aisle at the big box store has 10 feet of shelf and $40 price tags. Every one of the next several has a product on that shelf that was invented to replace it. Number 6 is coming, and it is the one that got the biggest replacement of all. Number 15, coarse sand alone as a rooting medium. Before there was a plastic clamshell, a pre-moistened, pH-balanced, brand-name propagation mix on the shelf, there was a bucket of coarse builder sand behind the barn. Your grandfather rooted currants, willows, and grape cuttings in it and got most of them. A bag of specialty propagation cubes runs $15 for a tray of 50. Sand is under $10 for a 50-pound bag from the hardware store, enough for a dozen trays. Nothing pushed sand off the market. Marketing just made peat plugs the default, and homeowners quit hearing about the older, cheaper option. The equipment sellers benefit, and the sand pile does not advertise. Old propagation manuals and the standard horticulture textbook from 1959 onward still list sharp sand as a legitimate medium for many species. Sink cuttings vertically 2 inches deep, water gently, keep shaded, and the roots come. A $5 bag, 100 cuttings. Roots. That one is sand. The next one is a jar. Number 14. Topworking an old tree instead of planting a new one. Your grandfather had a mature apple that made a fruit nobody in the family liked. He did not cut it down and buy a new one. In February, he sawed the main limbs back to stubs and grafted a variety they did like onto the wounds. 3 years later, the same trunk was making a different apple. A mature fruit tree takes 7 to 10 years to bear well. Planting a new one costs the tree, the labor, and a decade of waiting. Topworking keeps the roots and the trunk and cuts the wait to 2 or 3 seasons. The school curriculum committee that quietly took grafting off the vocational agriculture syllabus somewhere in the 70s or 80s made this a skill nobody's grandkids grew up watching. It was not banned. It just quit being handed down in the schoolhouse the same year it quit being handed down in a lot of kitchens. United States Department of Agriculture farmers' bulletins from the early 20th century laid out topworking step by step. Extension services still publish it. You saw back to strong stubs, cleft graft 2 or 3 scions per stub, seal with wax, and protect it from birds. One old tree, a new variety. No decade lost. That one is a saw. The next one is a seed. Number 13. A seedling pear from a grocery store fruit. Take a pear off the counter, save the seeds, cold stratify them in a bag of damp sand in the fridge for 3 months, and plant them. Your great-grandmother did this because a pack of nursery seedlings was a luxury and a fruit was a fruit. A commercial pear seedling is $5 to $10. A grocery store pear you were going to eat anyway is nothing, and it gives you 6 to 8 seeds. That is $50 of rootstock out of one piece of fruit. The certified rootstock industry standardized in the mid-20th century, and they made seedling rootstock sound old-fashioned. There is a real trade-off because a seedling grows big and takes longer to bear, but it lives 100 years, and a dwarfing rootstock lives 30. Extension propagation guides confirm the method. Eat the pear, save the seed. 60 to 90 days of cold, moist stratification, plant in spring, and graft the following spring or the one after. It is what the whole American orchard was built on before nurseries got big. A pear you were eating anyway. A seed, a tree. That one is a seed. The next one is a windowsill. Number 12. Softwood water rooting on the windowsill. Your grandmother had a jelly jar of mint on the sill by the sink for as long as anybody remembered. and every so often she pulled out a rooted piece and stuck it in a pot for a neighbor. Willow, forsythia, coleus, basil, some grapes. Soft green cuttings root in plain water on a bright sill. A 4-inch potted herb at the store is $4 now. 10 cuttings off one mother plant, rooted in a jar, saves you $40 and gives you plants that already know your kitchen. The garden center herb rack replaced the mother plant on the sill because the mother plant does not ring a register. The rooting hormone shelf sells you a product for a job water does for free on easy species. Extension guides note the honest limit. Water rooting works well on soft green species, but it does not reliably root pears, apples, or most hardwood fruit trees, and anyone promising it does is selling something. For a starter mint bed or a windowsill herb bench, it is the whole method. Cutting, jar, water, sill, a plant. Second pattern break. Somewhere around here, most folks start to notice that not one of these needed a chemical, a plug-in, or a receipt. That is not an accident. That is the whole shape of what got sold to your grandkids as complicated. Number 9 is coming, and it is the one that used to warm a whole propagation bed with what the barn was already making. Number 11, a clay pot upended as a humidity dome. Your grandfather rooted his best cuttings under an old chipped clay flower pot. He set the cutting in shaded dirt on the north side of the house, tipped a clay pot over it, and forgot it for 6 weeks. The clay held humidity like a bell jar and blocked the sun. A commercial humidity dome and heat mat set up at the store is $40 to $60. A cracked clay pot from the shed is nothing. For the same job, on hard-to-root species like some ornamentals and shrubs, it is a real match. Nobody banned a flower pot. The mist bench and heated propagator equipment sellers just marketed the plastic version, and the older trick quit getting mentioned. It was used from the Victorian gardens through the Depression. Old horticultural texts refer to it as a cloche method, and propagation manuals still recognize it. Water the ground well first, set the cutting, cover it, and check in a month. If the ground stays damp under the pot, roots form. One old pot, 6 weeks, a rooted plant. That one is a pot. The next one is a trench. Number 10, hardwood cuttings stuck in a sand trench, forgotten till spring. Late in the dormant season, your grandfather cut pencil-thick sticks of willow, poplar, grape, currant, gooseberry, and old shrub roses. He bundled them and stuck the bottom half into a foot-deep trench of moist sand along a north-facing foundation. Come April, half to nearly all of them had rooted, and he had a shelter belt in a bucket. 20 nursery liners at $15 each is $300 of hedge. The same 20 rooted willow whips cut off a ditch tree in February are free. Nothing pushed hardwood cuttings out except cheap plastic pots on a truck. Not a law, not a chemical, just convenience marketing decade after decade. One of the last pages Eli filled in the journal, winter of 1973, had this method written down. Modern land grant shelter belt guides teach the same method almost word for word. Cut, trench, sand, wait. 20 sticks, 1 trench, a living fence. That one is a stick. The next one is warm dirt. Number 9, a manure hotbed for early season rooting. Before every propagation bench in the country ran on an electric heat mat, your grandfather dug a pit, layered 18 inches of fresh horse manure and straw at the bottom, capped it with 6 inches of soil, and covered it with an old window sash. The manure decomposed and threw off gentle bottom heat for weeks. Cuttings and seedlings rooted like it was June in February. An electric propagation mat runs $40 to $60 and needs an outlet. A hotbed uses what a horse or barn is already making, and it is free. There is almost nobody in a backyard doing this now, and that is why I put it deep in this count. The equipment aisle owns the propagation heat business, and a pit full of manure does not advertise. Eli's journal has a page for it. No date, just the word works. Modern market garden techs still describe hotbeds: fresh manure, straw, soil cap, sash lid, thermometer. Honest note, this one you do not skip. A hotbed heats by microbial activity, so you ventilate on warm days so the heat does not cook the cuttings. Do not put your face down inside a fresh pit. Turn the top layer before planting and keep it away from where children play. A pit, a sash, February rooting, no plug. That one is warm. The next one is a knife on a pear tree. Number 8, the whip and tongue graft for pears and apples. Late winter, dormant, your grandfather cut a pencil-thick scion of the variety he wanted and a pencil-thick rootstock. He made matching diagonal cuts on each with a small tongue notch, fitted them together like two clasped hands, wrapped them with grafting tape, and sealed it with wax. 6 weeks later, the buds pushed. He had made a pear tree. A nursery pear tree is $30 to $50. A whip and tongue graft is a scion from a friend's tree and a roll of tape. 10 grafts in a February afternoon is $300 or $400 of orchard. The school curriculum that used to teach this in agriculture class quietly dropped it somewhere in the 70s and 80s. Not because it stopped working, but because the container nursery model did not need the customer knowing. United States Department of Agriculture farmers' bulletins from the early 1900s taught the whip and tongue graft to a whole generation of homesteaders. Extension services still publish it, and it is the standard method for pears. It is the answer to the honest question of how you make a pear tree from nothing but a stick. 2 cuts, 2 tongues, tape, wax, a pear tree. Third pattern break. Here is the honest heart of this whole list. A pear cutting will not root by itself in a jar. Anyone selling you that trick is lying, and I will not. What roots is the pear cutting you graft onto a rootstock. That is the answer. Not a hormone, but a knife. Number 7, heel cuttings off shrubs, snapped clean with a piece of old wood. For soft-wooded shrubs like currants, gooseberries, rosemary, lavender, and blueberries, your grandmother snapped a side shoot downward with a tiny sliver of the older, darker wood clinging to the bottom. That heel of old wood held the hormones the plant already made, and the cutting rooted without a thing added. 10 rooted heel cuttings of blueberry is $150 of nursery shrub. It cost an evening in the yard. The container nursery model shipped shrubs to the garden center on a truck, and folks quit snapping their own. Nobody outlawed a heel. It is still every propagation manual's easy method for hard-to-root shrubs. Take the shoot, pull down and out, trim the tail of old wood short, stick it in sand under a clay pot, and wait. The standard horticulture text has taught this since 1959. A snout, a stick, a shrub. That one is a snout. The next one is a window. Number 6, willow water. Your grandfather kept a mason jar in the cool of the pantry with a handful of young willow twigs steeping in rainwater. He soaked his softwood cuttings in it for a day before he stuck them in sand. Willow bark carries the natural hormones every plant uses to make roots. The same family of compound the little jar at the garden center is selling you for $8 an ounce. That jar of synthetic rooting powder is $8 to $10, and a serious propagator burns through 2 or 3 a year. That is $20 or $30 replaced by a ditch walk in April. The synthetic rooting powders were patented and rolled out by horticultural supply firms around 1935. Eli had a page from 1961 in the journal, Corner Grease Stained, that laid this out in 3 lines. Modern horticulture writing acknowledges willow stems carry indolebutyric acid and salicylic acid, the same active family in the commercial powder, though the concentration is lower and results are best on easy softwood species. Honest note, this is not a magic bullet for pear cuttings. It helps softwood cuttings of willow, forsythia, some grapes, some ornamentals. For a pear, you still graft. It is not sterile, so use it within the week. 1 jar, 1 ditch, a shelf of powder that stops mattering. That one is a jar. The next one is a sash. Number 5, a cold frame instead of a heated greenhouse. Your grandmother's propagation greenhouse was a wooden box with an old storm window laid on top, set against the south wall of the house. It held the sun's heat all day, released it slowly at night, and rooted cuttings and hardened seedlings from March through November. A backyard hoop greenhouse is a $500 project. A cold frame is scrap lumber and a salvaged window, and it costs you an afternoon. The Buy a Finished Tree magazine and television register showed a greenhouse in every episode and never a cold frame. The equipment sellers followed. Nothing was ever banned. Modern market garden text and every land grant extension guide still recommend cold frames as the highest return, low input propagation structure on a small holding. Face south, slope the sash, and vent on warm days. 1 window, 1 box, a 10-month propagation bench. That one is glass. The next one is the whole idea of a nursery. Number 4, bench grafting pear scions in February on your kitchen table. Your grandfather sat at the kitchen table with dormant scions in a wet rag, a stack of 1-year seedling rootstocks pulled from the nursery row, a sharp, thin knife, and a roll of grafting tape. He made 20 pear trees in an evening, potted them, kept them cool till the buds pushed, and planted them in April. 20 nursery pears at $35 is $700 of trees. Scions from a neighbor and rootstocks from your own seedling row cost nothing but the tape. The chain garden center replaced the February kitchen table with a spring parking lot full of potted trees, and 1 generation later, folks did not know it had ever been done at home. Stark Brothers Nursery in Missouri, in business since 1816, built its whole reputation on this graft. Eli wrote this one down in the spring of 1954, and every land grant extension service still teaches it word for word. Whip cut, tongue notch, fit, wrap, wax. Kitchen table, February, 20 pear trees. That one is a table. The next one is a mound. Number 3, the stool bed. 1 plant, 10 new ones every year. Your grandfather took a young clonal rootstock plant, established it a year, then cut it back nearly to the ground in early spring. It threw 6 or 8 vigorous shoots. When those shoots were a foot tall, he mounded soil up around their bases. They rooted at the base inside the mound over the summer. In late fall, he pulled back the soil and cut off 6 rooted shoots as 6 new plants. He left the stump and did it again the next year and every year after. Certified clonal rootstocks are $5 to $10 each. A stool bed of 10 mother plants throws you 60 new rootstocks a year. That is $3, $4, or $600 of stock forever. The mauling apple rootstocks and their equivalents were standardized in the mid-20th century as a paid product. Not banned, just resold forever to folks who did not know the plants would make more themselves. Eli's journal has an entry dated April of 1948, sketched in pencil: a plant, a stump, a mound around it, arrows for the shoots. Every nursery propagation textbook and land-grant nursery still uses the stool bed exactly this way today. It has not changed. 10 plants, 60 a year, forever. That one is a mound. The next one is the branch overhead. Number 2, air layering. Roots on a branch that is still on the tree. Your great-grandfather bent a low pear branch down, chose a spot as thick as his thumb, wringed the bark off cleanly a half-inch wide, packed damp sphagnum moss around the wound, wrapped it tight in a piece of oiled cloth, and tied both ends. 8 weeks later, when he could see white roots through the wrapping, he cut the branch off below the wrap and planted the whole thing. One pear tree made on the mother tree, no rootstock needed. A nursery pear tree is $30 to $50. An air layer is a handful of moss and a piece of plastic. I will be straight with you. First air layer I did alone at Eli's side, I wrapped it dry. 6 weeks of nothing. He did not laugh. He handed me the moss jar and said, "Wet, boy, not damp." That is how it went. The standard horticulture text since 1959 treats air layering as a legitimate propagation method for a range of woody plants, and folk practice on figs, magnolias, and some fruit species goes back further than the book. Pears are honestly on the harder end of the range, but the method is real. Choose a healthy branch, wring the bark, pack damp moss, wrap plastic, tie both ends, wait 8 weeks, cut below the roots, and plant. A branch on a tree, a handful of moss, a tree. Number 1 is not a trick. It is the thing every one of those 20 pointed at. Number 1 is a homestead that makes its own trees. Not one method, but all of them, on the same piece of ground, taught to the same pair of hands. The mother hedge feeds the cuttings. The cuttings feed the trench. The trench feeds the stool bed. The stool bed feeds the graft table in February. The graft table feeds the orchard. The orchard drops fruit, and the seedlings under it feed the rootstock row, and the rootstock row feeds the graft table next February. It is a loop that does not need the garden center, ever, not once. Emmett Vance's grandfather, back in that Missouri orchard in 1911, pegged that branch into the mound. The 4 rooted daughter pears they pulled the next spring became a 9-tree orchard. That orchard fed the Vance family through the Great Depression, through 2 wars, and through a paved road going in. The last of those trees was still standing in 1994. The grandson of the boy who watched sold the last of the fruit at a roadside stand and never once bought a pear tree in his life. That is the reversal the record says out loud. The old ground made trees. The store sells you one at a time and hopes you do not remember that. Your granddad's granddad made his own orchard, and so can you. I need to say the honest thing right here at the end. Almost any tree is honest as a whole list, not as one trick. A pear cutting will not root in a jar of anything, and anyone telling you that is selling you something. A pear cutting will root on the tree in a moss wrap as an air layer. A pear scion will root on a rootstock under a knife. Willow water help softwood cuttings, not pears. This is not fear selling. It is the line where the old ways stop and the fantasy starts, and I will not lie to you across it. Pick one, just one, not all 20, just this week. If it is dormant, cut 10 pencil-thick willow or currant sticks and shove them in a foot of sand along the north side of your house. If it is spring, bend a low pear branch, wring the bark, pack it with wet moss, and wrap it. If it is summer, snap a hill cutting off a currant and put it under a clay pot. If it is fall, rake leaves into a wire ring and start the leaf mold that will root next year's cuttings. I have kept a stool bed of 6 plants along my own fence for 11 years now. I have never once bought a rootstock. I make them. It cost me one afternoon in year 1, and the fence line has been paying me back in trees every year since. Tell me down below, did anybody in your family graft or root their own trees? Do you remember watching them do it? The one that gets the most stories in the comments is the one I build next. Your granddad's granddad made his own orchard. Somebody just did not get the chance to pass it down to you. Now it is yours again. Do not let it die on this side of you. Next time we are going deep on the one forgotten fruit tree that fed a family for 100 years off a piece of ground nothing else would grow on, and the exact decade the nursery catalogs quietly stopped listing it because there was no patent on a tree that made itself. If you want the old ways carried forward, ride along on this channel. There are folks out there still keeping this knowledge, and every one of you that stays turns the light up a little on the ones coming behind. The old man made me swear it would not die with me, so I am passing it to you. You pass it to the next one. Keep the old ways. They kept